Good morning, friends. Hearty welcome to all of you to the next edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series. And pleasure for me today to welcome Mr. Vinay Shenoy, who's the Managing Director of Infineon Technologies India Private Limited. He has overall responsibility for India business and operations and has more than 2 decades of experience in Indian semiconductor industry. He has also been associated with telecom, digital broadcasting, and consumer electronics industries. Vinay was also the chairman of Indian Electric and Semiconductor Association for the year 2015-16. So a hearty welcome to you, Vinay. Pleasure to have you on this edition of the VDMA CEO's Thought Leadership Series with us today, Vinay.
Thank you, Rajesh, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be in any session that you organize because it's very lively and all-encompassing, and also a privilege to share any of my thoughts that's associated with this industry or as the pandemic affects us. Many topics that we are confronted with, and it's just my privilege to share any thoughts that I have and take it with I provide them with my all humility. Not that I'm an expert on all these topics, but perspectives matter, especially when it comes with diversity.
Right.
So thank you for having me on.
Surely we'd like to draw on your experience, Vinay, and I'm sure we'll have a good interaction. Vinay, let me start. I was in fact very impressed with your company slogan, Semiconductor Solutions that make life easier, safer, and greener. So tell us about a little bit about the journey of Infineon in India, Vinay, and also the role that sustainability plays within the organization.
Sure. It's I think easier, safer, and greener is a societal challenge today. And we are addressing, as we believe, the very societal challenges that we list in our phrase. Now, let me try to explain a little bit about what we mean about with easier. Let me begin because it's easy. Look at the number of devices we are grappling with today, be it at home, be it at work. It's a struggle to interact with these devices and also interact with people or institutions on the other side of the devices. And our objective as one of the charter is to somehow reduce this pain or difficulty that people have when they interact with these sophisticated electronic devices, or whether it's in office. Take a smartphone, for example. For long, we have been used to interacting with the touch, which is with the keyboard, and that's not necessarily very convenient. And especially for aged people, also people who are dealing with multilinguals, it's a challenge. Now, you see voice recognition, speech recognition has become kind of a standard now. And that's not easy to achieve, especially when you're in a public area, when there are a lot of other voices and noises that you hear around you. So we contribute to making life easier with technologies such as sensors, microphones of that makes it possible for the smartphones to pick up just your voice from amongst the noise around you. And that is very rich technology. And this is one way we contribute to making easier. Gesture control is another one. Why should you always touch the panel? Why can't you operate gesture and interact with electronic devices with gestures? We are again very prominent there, working with various global players. Finally, easier also would imply for people like you and me who travel a lot, that whenever you carry devices, you also end up carrying, for example, power supplies along with them. Each one comes with its own power supply. They're big, bulky, something that you don't want to carry. Imagine a scenario where your power supplies become much smaller because they are so much more efficient, and they can charge your devices to almost 80% in less than 10 minutes. So that makes your life easier because you don't have to wait. I mean, many of you at the airports to charge your devices. So, this is another way that we try to make life easier. And going forward, imagine if one power supply can charge your smartphone, can carry your laptop or any other devices that you have with you. That is also an aspect of making life easier. So that is one part. Safer, I combine safe and secure together. Safety from a mobility perspective, as we keep moving around, traffic gets higher, speeds are increasing. Our technologies ensure that the vehicles that you drive are safe. Even if you end up making a minor mistake, the ability of the car to recover from that mistake and still not cause an accident or any grave injuries to people around you, whether it's anti-lock braking system or with cameras sensing pedestrians crossing and warning you, lane departures as you tend to fall asleep when you're driving on a highway. So there are various technologies that we are involved in, and we work with all the global OEMs and tier ones that make life safer for people. Now, I add security to this whole concept of working remotely, working online. You are throwing your identity on the internet for various transactions, be it your bank transactions or any payment that you make using, let's say in India, the UPI and apps. You always have a sense of concern within you, whether your identity, your passwords can be hijacked or your bank account can be hijacked. So this lingering concern. Now we provide technologies that are embedded in smartphones or other devices, laptops, for example, that helps secure an identity from any theft, whether it's your private documents, your identity, or any valuable information such as your bank account and passwords that anybody can breach. So that is what I would call as secure. Now, greener is something that we pride ourselves with. Look at the power consumption, right? You look at home. Earlier at home, we would have just a few plugs or sockets at home to charge maybe or connect to television or some other device. But today, there is such a struggle to find available socket at home because there are so many devices that are being charged and connected. All of these consume energy. So the energy consumption at home has gone up tremendously. Similarly, with industrialization, consumption in the industries has gone up significantly. Data centers, for example, with the internet and being so proliferating now, data centers have to churn out amazing amount of data back to the people who are accessing this data remotely on the cloud. Finally, of course, generation also. If we are not able to switch to or achieve renewable energy generation, then very soon, with carbon neutrality policies and regulations that are coming in, the world will face a challenge. So in all of these areas, Infineon has a major role to play, from generation to efficient transmission to consumption, be it at home, industries, or even data centers. So these are the three broad areas that we focus on as a company. Now that is also replicated in India. We serve all our customers who are in these areas locally with our technologies, enabling them to become more efficient, also provide safer and secure technologies to their customers, as well as making life convenient, whether it's an air conditioner that has some intelligence in it, or a washing machine, or anything else for that matter. We also develop technologies globally from India, whether it's for our automotive market, power market, or even the IoT market. We are about 1,200 of our own people here in India, and we also work with our partners for augmenting any resources during peak capacity requirements. For the sales part, we have a few hundred customers here in India, global, regional, as well as local, and we support them through our own sales team spread across Bangalore, Pune, and Delhi. Of course, with our partners to serve the large customer base in India. And then sustainability in everything plays a very important role because we have to live what we preach. We have to live what we try to get others to also adopt. So sustainability is a part, definitely. In fact, on a rooftop here, we have I think 20 kilowatt solar power plant that provides enough power to light up all our LED based lighting in the office during daytime, if at all we need. So we have tried to do whatever possible. We are in the middle of the city, so real estate is very expensive. In the available real estate, we have tried to do our best, switch to very energy efficient devices also. So we try to walk the talk, Rajesh.
Right. No, that's commendable, Vinay. Vinay, before we go to the next question, may I just request you to, if you can move slightly more towards your right, then I think you'll be in the middle of the frame. Just slightly towards. Yeah, on that side, yes. Slight, if you can just move slightly. Yes. Yeah, perfect. I think that's perfect. Yes. Yeah. Vinay, you have a lot of experience in the electronic sector, Vinay. Now, if you look at the Indian electronic sector, we are quite dependent on China. China is, in fact, the largest manufacturer of electronics in the world. And India's import is almost to the tune of about 60 billion US dollars, Vinay, sourced from China. Now, when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, Vinay, how can India develop self-resilience, self-reliance in this sector, despite of having such a large amount of imports in this sector?
One, it is a gradual phenomena. If you look at the time it took for China, as an example, to develop this level of strength in being the global supply chain country for electronics in the world, I think that journey started somewhere around 1991, and it's now about 30 years. So developing a complex supply chain, especially in electronics, is not easy. Maybe we can accelerate that, we can make it quicker, but definitely it will. We have to be prepared for 10 years at least. It's not something that you can turn around in the next 3 to 5 years.
Right.
And I'll explain why. When you talk about self-sufficiency or Atmanirbhar,
Right.
are you, which part of the value chain are you referring to? The electronic value chain starts at the far end with assembly of various electronic components into a device such as a smartphone or a laptop or any other consumer electronic device, which is but the final stage of integration. Then, of course, preceding that is the component supply chain, where these components are manufactured all over the world. Now, China does not use all the components. Displays predominantly come from Korea and Japan. Memories come from, again, Korea, Japan, and parts of the US. Touchscreen panels come again from various parts. Batteries, maybe, yes, a lot of China, but also technology comes from Japan and other parts of the world. So I would say it's not that the technology and the supply chain is all embedded within China. A large part of it definitely is, but the key and the strategic parts still are owned by respective regions. While some amount of manufacturing may happen in China, the ownership of these technologies is still elsewhere. Now, and then you go one step before that, you're talking about various ores or metals or special chemicals, which again have a global supply chain. So I think this is a pretty long supply chain that we are referring to. And I think when we say Atmanirbhar, we have to refer and we have to be specific and we have to make a start somewhere. Either you start in the middle and spread in both directions, or start from the top end of the value chain and then trickle down towards the end. I think this choice is critical. Now, if you ask me, I would say we start from the end, which is the final assembly of various devices, because that's where you develop an understanding of the supply chain exceeding be it, let's say, a display, a battery, also mechanical devices, which constitute a reasonable amount of the cost of, as we say, bill of materials of a electronic device. The mechanical parts around it, the display glass, for example, the printed circuit board, again, which is one, and the assembly of the printed circuit. We should start there, and the country has started with that aspect. Final assembly of electronics. You look at the number of smartphones that are finally assembled in India. However, that is just a beginning. We have to rapidly move one step back into the component supply chain. And then, of course, it doesn't get easy. Let me take the example of smartphone, because we are proud about our smartphone final assembly in India. On an average, a smartphone has electronics with 40 different categories. And what do I mean by category? Memory is a category, display is a category, battery is a category, wireless connectivity, the modules that go in is a connectivity, gyroscopes, accelerometers, compasses that go into all modern smartphones, a category, PCBs, a category. So there are 40 such categories that go into even what appears to be a small device like a smartphone. Now, if you then break them down further, you're already talking about 300 to 500 key components and subassemblies. And that's not very tense. If you split that further down, you're if you count the last component that goes in at the lowest level, you're talking about 2,000 components that go into a smartphone. Unlike a cement industry where you set up a cement factory and all that you produce is cement. Everyone can produce cement as long as you have the raw materials, which are not very many. But whereas a complex electronic device has large number of components, and these 2,000 components probably come from 100 suppliers all over the world.
Right.
And there are various levels of integrations taking place. So, for example, take a camera. A camera has an image sensor, and that has to be then encapsulated with a lens and put in a mechanical housing and have an electronic behind it and then gets embedded into a phone. So, it's not easy. You cannot say camera is camera. And for the lens, there are different suppliers. For the sensors, there are different suppliers. So we have to determine as a country, and with respect to an application like a smartphone, which are those key components that we focus on for Atmanirbhar. It's totally diluted if we focus on all the 2,000. Impossible and not necessary, because many of these are commodities and the supply chain is from all over the world. So we don't have to depend on, let's say, one geography, one region for the supply chain. So pick those where we can create value, and it's not just about manufacturing. Can we innovate also further and become a global supplier, be it out of India for a global company or out of India with a local company? So both of these options are possible. But I think that is very important, and the government is attempting that. Which are those key components, for example, in a smartphone, similarly for other devices, be it a washing machine or laptop or any cameras, speaker phones. You see on Amazon, there are so many electronic devices that you buy, even medtech. So a start has been made. Now we have to accelerate. I would say a good example, a reference example for me of having built a complete local ecosystem is the Nokia factory of the yesteryears in Sri Perumbudur.
Right.
Which produced the largest number of phones for Nokia in the world, not by value, but by volume.
Right.
During their heydays. And around Sri Perumbudur, Nokia also ensured it built its entire ecosystem. It forced its suppliers to come and set up factories so that the raw materials and the components can be supplied just in time. Right. And that's where they derived efficiency. And now when an ecosystem like that is set up, other companies can also leverage from this ecosystem, which was set up by, let's say, in the past by Nokia. I think, in my opinion, we have to get, let's say, some anchor global companies to come and set up a global leader in any category of electronics, to come and set up their factories here, help them build the ecosystem, and let other companies leverage from that ecosystem. Trying to do it independently and set up fragmented ecosystems, I think will take a lot of time. So if I were to be the decision maker, I would say, let's get some 4, 5, 6 companies in different categories globally leading. I help them set up their factories here. Anyway, most of them have their innovation centers in India anyway. So it just helps. And then start your Atmanirbhar initiative with those 4 other companies, and then spread it as quickly as possible. I think that is what I would say, and give it time. And the policies of the government have to be very consistent. We have to look at a 10 to 15-year policy that does not change, irrespective of who leads the government and which policy power. We should be able to become Atmanirbhar in electronics to a great extent. We don't have to be 100%. Nobody has, by the way. No developed country has it. Even if we reach 25 to 50% of the total consumption of electronics in India, with some amount of localization, but more importantly, how can we contribute to the global requirements? See, India is anyway is a marginal consumer in electronics, if you add up the entire electronic industry. So if we limit ourselves to India, then we are constraining ourselves, because efficiencies come from scale. Right. So whenever we look at the ecosystem, don't look at it purely from India and local Atmanirbhar, but why can't we also parallelly, and with that vision, that we go global from India? Right. Then you're talking about larger scale. I think this should be also the focus, and not just Atmanirbhar. Right. It is possible. We have all the raw ingredients. the environment in the country being democratic, very open, free market access, uh, I think is an example. Now we just need to get those basic ingredients, whether it's uh, policy, speed of executing policies, speed of approving various uh, requirements of our companies. I think these are getting better and better. And I think there will be an inflection point when everyone says, okay, now it is good enough for us to now move to India. I think
Right.
that time is not very far. I'm sure, Rajesh.
Right. I think thanks for the very valuable insights, Vinay. I think you really, with your vast experience in this sector, I think given very valuable points also. So thank you for that, Vinay. Vinay, let us come to another sector where you are also closely involved is the e-mobility sector. Now, certainly, when we talk about the e-mobility sector, India is on the path of electric vehicle, but however, stage in the beginning of this whole journey. So, Vinay, in your opinion, first of all, I would like to ask you, how do you see the development of the e-vehicle industry in India? And second, what are the key initiatives or push necessary for the growth of this industry, Vinay?
I think we are on the cusp of a change globally as well as for country.
Right.
Why do I say we are on the cusp? We are about to transition. The biggest cost element in a electric vehicle is the battery, which constitutes nearly 40 to 45% of the total cost of the car. Right. The remaining, I would say, 40% is primarily the car that remains as a car, which is the metal, sheet metal doors, trims, glass, steering wheel, you name it, right? All of those tires, braking systems, lights, etc. That remains. Then the remaining about 20%, if I may use a rough rounded percentage, would come from these new electronics that go towards using the storage, energy storage in the battery to power the car to move forward. And these are the motors, battery management systems, all the cables and harnesses, because you're talking about high currents, and a couple of others associated with running the vehicle and braking, for example. It is very interesting to note that the cost per kilowatt hour of storage in a battery has come down to nearly about $110 per kilowatt hour. Right. And this is seen as an inflection point right now, because it then brings in from a total cost of ownership parity with conventional gasoline driven cars. Right. I think if it goes a little below towards 90, which I'm sure it will go in the next maybe a year or two, then you already have, like the solar industry, right? Today is able to generate power and sell back power to the power transmission corporations in India at a cost lower than it takes to generate using coal. Right. So that inflection point has been achieved in solar. That's why solar, you see so many power plants being set up. Now this is the same that will occur here. The cost learning curve of a battery is coming down rapidly, and the moment it reaches 190, I think we are in good shape and companies will start pushing. This is also one area where the country can become Atmanirbhar, because you see one of the most mature ecosystems we have in the country is the automobile sector. Okay. Yeah. Excluding maybe some part of electronics, but otherwise for most of it we have a local ecosystem. So about 50 to 60% of the cost of a car is localized. In some cases it's even higher in the country. Now, battery is something that we should somehow focus on and become Atmanirbhar. Of course, there are certain raw materials like lithium or any other, depending on the chemistry that you use, that we'll have to tie up or get security in supply chain that we can ensure, because that's not centered on one country, it's centered around also a few countries around the world. I think that we have done a good job in securing some supplies. Now, how can we focus on developing chemistry here and not just make the final batteries, but also the cells, and focus on improving the efficiency? I think that is one area where I would recommend very strongly the government to establish Atmanirbhar in batteries for electric vehicles. Second, in terms of segments that I would believe would drive the adoption of electric vehicles in this country, And this is where I say we'll be counterintuitive here in this country. While most countries in the world are focusing on passenger vehicles and maybe large cargo that go on highways, I think our opportunity comes from public transportation. I would say public and shared transportation. Because we still are very dependent on public and shared transportation here, unlike the West, which has already moved to a lot more private transportation. And for them, it makes sense to focus on the private transportation and hence the passenger vehicles. But in India, a large part of it either is public, shared, or small vehicles, right? Primarily commuting within the city.
Right.
So I would say that would be our first opportunity to adopt public transportation buses that move around in cities or towns, also short distances between nearby towns where the typical round trip is no more than 100 or 110 kilometers. And because it's a well understood circuit, you can time it well, plan it well. So whether it's the charging infrastructure or, as I am fond of, the battery swapping technology,
Right.
until the charging infrastructure is established in the country at different locations, I think this battery swapping technology can become a good model for transitioning to electric vehicles for large public transportation. And since these are also managed mostly through the government, through the public-private partnerships, through build, own, and operate models, I think as long as there's a business case for a private operator, adoption is not difficult, and the government can mandate that for all future requirements, they shall only be electric vehicles. So I think that is one opportunity. The second opportunity is, of course, the large number of rickshaws that we have of different forms, whether it's a cycle rickshaw that has been converted into an electric e-rickshaw, or even the three-wheeled rickshaws from well-known companies in India. I think they're just waiting for the economic case to work out and the transition. But in the meantime, we should look at how to retrofit conventional rickshaws, for example, or any gasoline-driven engines and provide an easy path towards electric drivetrain, because the electric drivetrain itself is not very complex. And I think there aren't too many players in this country for rickshaws and other light commercial vehicles. I think if there is a standard that we adopt, then it is possible to also do a retrofit, maybe by the same companies themselves, until we move towards newer vehicles. This happened successfully, Rajesh, if you notice maybe a decade and a half ago, when all these rickshaws and buses were asked to move towards CNG, because the diesel that they were using or kerosene that they were using was very polluting. And this transition worked very well because it was a retrofit in many cases. So people did not have to buy new vehicles. They could still continue their old vehicle, but with some retrofits. And the availability of, let's say, a gas cylinder was easy. You did not have to go to a petrol pump and look for a petrol pump or a gas station that would also have CNG dispensing.
Right.
You buy those 5-liter cylinders or 10-liter cylinders from various stores, and you knew where those stores were as a rickshaw owner, and you would just go and swap it. You did not have to get your customer to wait until you filled it up. I think such models, which have become very successful in the country, which are unique to us, should also be seen as a role model for adoption towards EV. And we should not go with the conventional approach. If you're transitioning to EV, it has to be a brand new vehicle. I think this transition path has to be provided. So I would say rickshaws, e-rickshaws, also light commercial vehicles that ply in the city through logistics providers. I think those will be the next bet for me. And now shared mobility is becoming very common, especially with two-wheelers. You go to any metro station, you see various shared mobility service providers for two-wheelers. Many of them are already electric now, and I think this should further increase. And I think that's a natural bet again to force them to go electric, because they have a good business case, and the convenience is what the consumers pay for. They are not very sensitive to cost there. So I would say this is a very good start, and then we would move. By that time, hopefully, the installation of various infrastructure required to have a successful proliferation of electric vehicles would increase, which would be fun. And that's when the passenger vehicles, the first early movers to procure electric vehicles, will start making their buys. And then right now it will be very embryonic. People who want to make a statement or feel compelled to have their third car or the fourth car as an electric vehicle will buy it. Definitely the first car, for anybody buying a first car in India, very unlikely that they would buy an electric vehicle. It would always be second or third.
Right.
So I think this is how I see the adoption of electric vehicles in India. And the government is trying its best, but I would say let it go a step forward. Wherever they have control over mobility, city buses, etc., I think they should make the move and say we will lead from the front as a government. And I think that has also in the past that the government leads from the front and then others follow.
Right. And we also have now some of the states offering incentives to the people for electric vehicles. Like we have road tax. There would be no road tax in some of the states also. So I think these are all steps in the right direction to promote electric vehicle industry in India.
Maybe I add a comment more that I missed.
Right.
Today we try to bundle with the vehicle.
Right.
I have a strong feeling that if the battery and the administration of the battery can be made into a separate business model or a business case, where people can rent batteries and you can have many deployment centers all over. That will spawn off a brand new ecosystem for batteries. There's no reason why the battery should be coupled. I mean, look at today petrol and diesel dispensing in a vehicle. It doesn't come with the vehicle. It is supplied by various other agencies like Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum or Shell or others. So why can't batteries be provided? Of course, that requires certain amount of standardization.
Right, absolutely.
I think standardization is not a big challenge. Either is the electronics that interfaces between the vehicle and the batteries. I think these can be made possible. Either the government or the auto industry has to make up its mind, apply their minds. There are enough talents available in this country, and help the government to develop a standard. Then, of course, the whole battery ecosystem can be independently developed because you're complying to a standard, and then it should work.
Right.
Today, you see many of the chargers that we have in our phones. Whether you buy a Android phone or an iPhone or any other devices from any other manufacturers, if it's a micro USB, it works with each other. I mean, we are not scared to plug it in. So I think this is something that we also need in the auto industry. It's possible through electronics. And I think here, if we make this work for many developing countries, which also have a big need for public transportation, they will start also following us. And I think that's where we as a country can be a role model representing the large number of developed world, which are geographically very diverse.
Right. No, I think a very valid point, Vinay. Vinay, let me come perhaps to the last question. I would have loved to continue our discussion, but time is running out. So, Vinay, of course, COVID has had a huge impact on businesses and workforce. In fact, companies have been impacted not only financially, but also emotionally. Vinay, it is certainly, I think, quite a testing time, challenging time for industry leaders. So what we would like to request you is if you could share 2 or 3 tips from your side, how CEOs can help and support in this period. I think especially these tips would be very of great immense value also to the German CEOs and the German companies operating in India. So I wanted to request you to share 2 or 3 views from your side or your tips on how CEOs can navigate their boat in the stormy water of COVID.
Okay. I think historically, if you look at how we have been organizing ourselves as a company or as a corporate, or how we structure ourselves, to a certain extent, it's with a command and control approach. That works when you have people around you, you have a good oversight, and then you can, of course, direct people to move in a certain direction or correct their direction, whether it's an engineer or a manager, etc. So leadership has been pretty successful in this context where people are very close to you and they're reachable. And they're emotionally connected because they see each other often. So there is a face-to-face connect, and you just not know the other person as a professional, but you know the other person also as a human being and as a person. Then you know their attitude, behavior, and what do they mean when they say something, right? The intent behind what you speak is also well understood. Now, this starts to become difficult as you start working remotely and
Right.
you induct more people remotely into the organization. Uh, it starts to become difficult. I think so. Leaders have to adopt their leadership style, move away from command and control, and into newer forms. I think that I would say for leaders is it will be the topmost priority. And now this is not only relevant for the next 1 year because we still are dealing with people who are working remotely who we know for many years already in the past.
Right.
But as companies grow and there is a churn amongst people, people leave and new people join. Now these people will have to be inducted to a great extent remotely. And if even if you adopt the hybrid system in the end with some number of people working from office and others working from home, uh, training people and most importantly getting them emotionally connected to the organization will become a major challenge. So I would say if you ask me maybe top three and maybe I'll throw in one more as a bonus is for leaders it's very important to now focus on the purpose. Why does a organization exist, a team exist, whether it's a CEO or even the levels down? It was not important as much in the past because you could direct people on a daily basis, oversee on a daily basis. uh, Now unless people understand why do they have to do and what do they have to do it for clearly, they cannot operate autonomously and independently and still serve the priorities of the company. So I think it is now going to be that higher a priority for leaders to communicate why we do what we do.
Right.
I think this clarity becomes very important. Second, uh, then empower people, cut down bureaucracy, cut down red tapeism, make people get people to act freely because they know the interest of the organization, they know the priority of the companies, and then they will do the best they can, decide on their own what is important. I think this will be the second shift, that is distributing authority rather than concentrating authority through uh, the conventional hierarchical approaches.
Right.
I think this would be my second advice. Uh, and of course, third, the larger an organization gets, the more complex processes get. And that
Yes.
is there is a reason behind it because you introduce bureaucracy for efficiency.
Right.
Now, the question going forward is it the efficiency that you focus on, or is it the flexibility and responsiveness you focus on?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Because dynamic and they're
Right.
changing, and if you can't reach people on a daily basis, you
Right.
prepare them to be flexible and responsive, and that requires a shift in the in how we deal with processes and people. And I think every leader, every organization should now critically look at their own processes that were working very well in the context of the past.
Right.
But now in the new context, will have to be seriously relooked at. And maybe there has to be a paradigm shift completely. Keep processes light, keep rules simple, everyone understands. Uh, and of course, uh, then they can act on their own very easily. I
Right.
think these are the three that I would say are at least that I'm confronted and focusing on personally myself.
Right.
Uh, and of course, when you're spread across remotely and your physical contact gets lesser, how do you communicate? How do you share information? It cannot be done through the conventional means. I mean, we all have realized calling for a all hands meeting or a town meeting, as we call it,
Right.
remotely on WebEx. Uh,
Right.
Within the first 2 minutes, all of them have switched off their videos and muted their phones. And now you have no clue how many of them are even listening to you. And
Absolutely.
uh, while when you're in a physical space, you can at least watch the engagement of people when you as you're speaking and as you're communicating. So we have to come up with newer methods to share information seamlessly, and
Right.
there probably technology helps us a lot. I think
Right.
would be the bonus I would throw in on top of the three.
Right. Right. Vinay, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure interacting with you. And on behalf of the German Engineering Federation, VDMA, wishing you and the team all the very best. A lot of success for the new year 2020-21. And wishing you and your family also Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Vinay. Keep
Thank
well,
you.
stay fit, and stay well, Vinay.
I will do so, and my best wishes to every colleague in the industry that they recover from the challenges from COVID as early as possible and are back to their feet running. But adoption is key. I think we have to not adopt, but adapt to the changes. And wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone in this industry. Thank you very much, Rajesh. A pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vinay. Take care. Goodbye. Goodbye. Yeah.